Welcome everyone to an APH Virtual Excel Academy. Today's session is communicating about visual impairment and handling those not so fun, uncomfortable situations. We are so excited to have you with us today. Feel free to drop your name in the chat and where you're from. We'd love to say hi. We are so glad to have you join us today. You are at the APH Virtual Excel Academy, and our session today is really built for middle and high school students, but everyone is welcome. We are talking about communicating about visual impairment and handling those not so fun, uncomfortable situations. As you're getting in, get settled, feel free to say hi in the chat. That's how we share most of our information, though. If you have a hard time with the chat and you want to ask questions directly, you can raise your virtual hand and I will give you that ability. So one more time before I turn it over, you are at the APH Virtual Excel Academy. Today is communicating about visual impairment and handling those not so fun, uncomfortable situations. Our instructor today is Kate Katulak, and she joined us last spring as well. I hope you will give her a nice warm welcome. And Kate, take it away.
All right, thank you and hello everyone. Again, my name is Kate Katulak and I am thrilled to be your instructor for today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I live and work in Massachusetts. I'm a certified teacher of students with visual impairments. I happen to be blind. I'm a user of screen readers, specifically JAWS and VoiceOver, and I have a very cute, very wonderful 2-year-old yellow Labrador retriever named Dodger. The focus of today, as Leanne said, is handling those unwanted situations and communicating about vision impairment. I'm going to start with a bit of background. Everyone, regardless of ability or disability, has uncomfortable, awkward, and embarrassing moments. I know I do. These happen to everyone. I'm sure you can think of times when you or someone you know has had something in your teeth. That's embarrassing. It can feel awkward if you are trying to make a new friend, or maybe you have a crush and you're not sure if that person likes you back. It can be uncomfortable, depending on your personality, to speak up in class or be called upon. We all have these embarrassing, awkward, and uncomfortable moments. And sometimes they have nothing to do with being visually impaired. Can you think of a situation when you felt embarrassed, uncomfortable, or awkward? If so, I'd love to hear a few words about that situation. And first, we're going to start with those uncomfortable, awkward, and embarrassing moments that happen that you feel have nothing at all to do with being visually impaired. So I'd love to hear from a few of you. Go ahead and type into the chat box. Embarrassing, awkward, or uncomfortable moments. It could be a moment that happened at school or at home, with friends, with family, or with complete strangers. Robin, do we have anyone in the chat speaking up?
Hello, Kate. This is Teacher Robin in the background, and I can already let you know that Zach says when he has to read out loud. And then wait a minute, I think I see another one coming through. Monica says she could feel like her face was on fire when she wanted to meet somebody new. Oh, I agree with you, Monica. And Kim says walking into the doctor's office for an appointment on the wrong day. We agree. So those answers have popped up right now. Oh, here comes Leah. Leah says, I have been in front of others with my zipper down.
Ooh. Oh no, I think that's probably happened to others on the line too. I know it's happened to me.
It's happened to me. So those are our answers that have come through. If anybody else comes through. Oh, she says, I've also joined the wrong virtual class before. Oh, yes. Or had the wrong time for a virtual class. Yes. So fun stories. We can all agree with everybody. Those are your answers so far, Kate.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you all for sharing. These uncomfortable, awkward, and embarrassing moments happen to everyone. And unfortunately, they happen more often than we would like. But regardless of whether you have a disability or not, everyone is going to face these unwanted situations. Sometimes these moments can feel like directly related to being visually impaired. As I said, I happen to be blind, and I have lots of experiences that I could share related to my vision impairment that have happened where I felt embarrassed, awkward, and sometimes uncomfortable. I'm going to share a couple of these situations with you, and feel free to laugh because a lot of time has passed and I'm going to be laughing too. So I'll feel if you laugh, you'll be laughing with me, not at me. One time I accidentally mistook my blue eyeshadow and blush. And so you got it. I put blue eyeshadow on my cheeks. That was embarrassing. Another time, I was standing on a street corner. I was about to cross, and I had a question for the person I sensed next to me. So I asked, "Excuse me, is it safe to cross?" I waited a couple of seconds. No one responded. And then someone who was walking up behind me said, "Oh, excuse me, you're talking not to a person, but to a lamp post." Talk about awkward and uncomfortable. I'm going to share just one more moment with you because I love laughing about these things and talking about them with other people who might be able to relate to uncomfortable experiences with a visual impairment. There was a time I was throwing a dinner party. I was making some fried raviolis with delicious handmade sauce. I was so excited when the meal was done and I served it, but I like to taste my food before I have my guests taste it too. So just as everybody was taking their seats, settling in to have a taste of my oh so delicious meal, I put one of the raviolis in my mouth, only to discover that instead of pulling out frozen ravioli from my freezer, I pulled out frozen peaches on accident, and I was about to serve everybody fried peaches covered in marinara sauce. Now that might sound good to some of you, but I have tasted it, and let me tell you, it is not good. It is disgusting. I was mortified, really, really embarrassed. And I thought, my gosh, if I wasn't visually impaired, this never would have happened. Sure, awkward, uncomfortable, and embarrassing moments can happen to anyone, and they do happen to everyone. But sometimes we might feel that the uncomfortable situations are related to being visually impaired. And as someone who's blind, I want to tell you that's okay. Sometimes it's okay to feel like it's unfair that these situations happen. Sometimes it's okay to acknowledge that these situations are related to being visually impaired. And it's even better when we can talk about them with other people who can relate to us. So I ask you once again to type a few words into the chat box, a few words to describe a situation that you feel was related to your visual impairment, when you felt a little awkward, a little uncomfortable, or maybe even a little embarrassed. I think the other students would love to hear that they're not alone in these experiences. So in a couple of seconds, I'm hoping that Robin will be able to tell us that we have some commiseration, some sharing of experiences to which we all can most likely relate. Robin, have we had any responses come through?
Well, Kate, I had to compose myself because your stories, I'm not going to lie, I love you as a friend, but I was laughing so hard at your stories. And not because it was just funny, but because I felt what you were going through. I didn't do it because I was blind, but that shared feeling was there. Sorry. So Asher has says, I could not make a basket with a basketball. Zach says he could not find the cursor on the screen fast when with his friends. And Monica says she was eating and realized that there was no food on her spoon when she was taking a bite. Leah says she ran into a wall and bashed in her braces when sprinting across the gym. Oh, ouch, Leah. So those are our answers that have come through. Oh, here comes Kim. One of my students was leaving a new classroom and ran into the trash bin and then fell head first into the wall. Layla has also had the experience of speaking to someone only to discover it was an item and not a person. I have to say that is a rite of passage for a blind person. If you haven't ever done that, you got to be in the club. That's something that has to happen to you. And everybody has experiences. So those are your answers that are coming through, and we all feel for you, Kate. You're doing a great job explaining this.
Robin, thank you for reading, and thank you all once again for sharing. And really, I want to thank you for helping me feel a little bit better about the experiences I've had, about the times when my visual impairment, or let's face it, just because I'm human, when I felt embarrassed, uncomfortable, or awkward. It really helps me feel like I'm more normal, knowing that everybody else has these experiences as well. Sometimes talking about our experiences with others who can relate makes us feel better. And I certainly feel better knowing that you all can understand where I'm coming from and how it doesn't always feel good in the moment, but we move on from them, talk about them, and sometimes even laugh about them. So today,
oh wait, so Kate, I have to jump in because two other people did share something that I thought we would want to talk about. So Kathy says, one time when I was teaching kindergarten, my principal was coming to visit. I thought I would run in my classroom bathroom while my students were finishing up an assignment before my principal got there. What I forgot was that my amplifier microphone was still turned on, even though I thought I had turned it off. Soon after going in, my students began to giggle, and some students said, "What is that sound?" Oh no, she went to the bathroom with her microphone on. She said, I quickly turned my microphone off just in time before my principal walked into her classroom. And Cami is working with her aide, and she said that her aide, who has vision, accidentally went into the men's restroom when she meant to go into the women's restroom. There you go.
yeah,
Back to you.
it happens to everyone. We have all had experiences that we wish we could have avoided. So today we're going to keep on relating to, and soon even learning from, one another. Now that we know we all have these.
Ooh, so we have a wee bit of problem there, Kate.
So fun. There are sometimes things one can do comfortable and not so fun situations. And that's preferred. Preventing these situations from happening is the best option. Sometimes we can help control, and other times we can't. We may have to face situations as they happen. Our goals or objectives for today are to learn strategies to help prevent uncomfortable, awkward, and embarrassing situations. We're also going to learn about strategies to respond when these situations happen. And finally, we're going to recognize the importance of using effective ways to discuss a vision impairment. Before I continue, are there any questions? I'll give everyone a couple of moments to write any questions that you may have in the chat box. You might have a question about anything that you need repeating, or if you are thinking about a situation that happened to you, keep that because we'll come back to it later. But for now, are there any questions about our topic for today, about our objectives for today, or anything like that? Robin, have any questions come in?
They have not, but Kate, I will let you know that for a hot second, you did freeze for a moment. So I think if you wanted to just repeat your objective, that would just be great. Toby is wondering how long our meeting is. We are going for an awesome hour, which Leanne has already answered in our chat window. But yeah, Kate, it just was a hot freeze, but which is funny. I just said hot freeze. But if you could go back and say what our objectives are one more time, that would be great. And no other questions, so you could keep going.
Well, I have to say, Robin, thank you for letting me know. I feel a little uncomfortable and awkward, to be honest, that my camera froze. But hey, it happens. I'm going to laugh about it later. And now I'm going to go ahead and move on by repeating the objectives. Today, we're going to learn strategies to help prevent uncomfortable, awkward, or embarrassing situations. We're also going to learn strategies to respond when those situations happen. And finally, we're going to recognize the importance of effective ways to communicate about differences such as a vision impairment.
Miss Kate, Robin writing in, Asher just popped up with a question I wanted you to know about, and I bet a lot of other people feel this way. They say, what do you do when someone says hi, but you don't know who it is?
Wow, what a great question. That happens to me all the time. And I have two suggestions. My first is to set an example and advocate. So when I am in a new classroom, when I am with a new group of friends, when I'm meeting anyone for the first time, I like to tell them to please let me know what their name is. Even if it's someone who I've spoken to every single day. When I see them in a new situation or on a new day, I ask that they please say their name. And that's how I avoid the embarrassment of not knowing who they are. And if it does happen that someone forgets or just doesn't tell me their name and I start talking to them and I'm not sure who they are, I choose to just ask. Sure, it can be a little uncomfortable at times, but in the end, it's worth it and makes me and the other person feel more comfortable because I know who they are. So I, one, prevent the situation from happening by telling people I'd like them to say their name. And I handle the situation if it does occur by just asking them, hey, I don't recognize your voice. Could you tell me who you are? Thanks for that question.
Oh, you've got another one too. Zach wants to know when a friend jumps in and tries to help you, but you don't want the help. What should you do?
Another good one, Zach. Thank you for your question. I have a feeling that every single person in this webinar can relate to that, whether or not they have a vision impairment. As people, sometimes we get help when we don't want it and when we feel we don't need it. So again, sometimes I try to prevent these situations from happening by telling people what I am able to do. A lot of people don't understand what it's like to be blind or visually impaired. And I am very comfortable sharing about what it's like to be blind, about all the things that I can do. And I find that that often prevents people from trying to overstep and give that help that I may not need. But sometimes I can't prevent those awkward situations. And it's uncomfortable when people do try and do a little bit too much for me. I like to keep in mind that it's coming from a good place. They are trying to be kind and compassionate and helpful. So I respond in turn with kindness and I thank them for offering their help. But again, I advocate and let them know, you know what? This is actually something I can do. And this is something that I would like to do for myself. Great questions. Any more, Robin, or should we keep on going?
We can go in a second. I want to let you know that Cammie in the audience says that she also recognizes people by their voices. And if she doesn't know who it is, she asks just like you do. And you're good to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Cammie, and thank you, Robin, for reading. So we're going to move on to talking about preventing some of those situations. I'm going to introduce an acronym, 4 letters of a word, each letter standing for another word. And that acronym is PLAN, P-L-A-N, plan. It just so happens that by using the steps of PLAN, we can help prevent awkward, uncomfortable, and oh so embarrassing moments from happening at all. I'm going to go through what each letter of PLAN plan means. And then we'll have some fun talking about how to apply the plan. The P of plan stands for process. This means taking time to process or think about the situation. When it comes to trying to prevent an uncomfortable situation, we often have to think ahead. And this actually gives us time to process when we can think about what might happen and all of the details that goes into that. If you have an experience that you'd like to avoid, try P, processing through it. What details are important or unimportant? You might ask yourself, what is the outcome that I'm trying to prevent? You can also process through your perspective. How would you feel? What do you want to feel? What don't you want to feel? But also think about the perspectives of others. What might others feel in this situation? So P in the plan stands for process. The next letter in PLAN is L. L stands for list. And this refers to listing or identifying possible actions and their outcomes. In other words, what are all of the possible actions that could be taken to prevent the situation from happening? And then go one step further. With each possible action, what are the outcomes that could then result? And that's really the key here. You have to consider, if I do this, then what might happen? If I don't eat the broccoli, then I can't get broccoli in my teeth. If I don't eat the broccoli, that would be the action, not eating the broccoli. I don't get my veggies at dinner. If I eat the broccoli and take another action of making sure I got those veggies, and I floss after I eat, then maybe I won't have broccoli, but I'll still get that healthy dinner. L is for, P is for process, L is for list, and A, the next letter, is for action. Action. This is where you take the action to lead to the best possible outcome. You've already processed through what the situation is. You've listed the possible actions, and now you are going to follow through with the action you feel will lead you to the best possible outcome. Again, to get to this step, you have to process, you have to list, and then you can take action. Go with it. Trust your gut. And sometimes there may be several actions needed to achieve one bigger action. Actions can be short or long term. And again, sometimes multiple steps may be necessary to get you to the larger action. For example, maybe you feel that improving your technology skills will help prevent the awkwardness of needing to get unwanted help in class. But before you can enhance your technology skills, you have to get new technology. So that would be one action that has to happen, one step that needs to happen. And maybe you have to get training too. And that's another action, that's another step. And once you've checked off those, you can get to the final thing, which is using that technology in class and preventing the unwanted help. So far, we have P for process, L for list, A for action. I used to be a cheerleader, if you can't already tell, and we have one letter left, N. The N in plan stands for notice. This means observing and analyzing the consequences of the action that you took. So again, this comes after you've taken that action. You decided to eat the broccoli. You decided to floss. And now you process the end result. What happened? Did you prevent the discomfort, the awkwardness of having broccoli in your teeth? Evaluate the consequences and consider, did you end up with the outcome that feels best for you? Was the action successful, or was the action not successful? N stands for notice. So let's practice. We are going to apply the steps of plan with a little scenario. PLAN, plan. Imagine that you are going to a movie theater with some friends, and you know that it will be difficult or impossible to see the theater, maybe because you don't have any usable vision, or because you have trouble seeing in low lighting. Either way, you know that you're going to have a little trouble getting around there at the dark movie theater. And as you're getting ready to go, the ultimate question pops in your mind: to use or not to use the cane. And if you use another mobility aid, then replace the word cane with that. Maybe to use, to bring or not to bring my guide dog, to use or not to use my monocular, whatever it is. So you want to prevent an uncomfortable, awkward, or embarrassing moment that could potentially result if you are not able to see so well in that theater and you don't bring along your cane or other mobility aid. So we are going to PLAN, plan. First, we're going to process. Remember, this means take time to think about the situation. What is the situation? What are the details that are important or not important? What outcome are you hoping to prevent? And this can be different depending on the person. For some, they may want to prevent running into someone or something if they don't use their cane. For others, it may be that if they use their cane, they're going to feel self-conscious that their friends are looking at them and seeing them differently. So they want to prevent feeling different. The situation, the outcome, the thing that you want to prevent, that awkwardness, it's very personal. So you have to process what's important and not so important to you. Next, we are going to list. Again, this refers to listing or identifying the actions you could take, and then taking it one step further and thinking about possible outcomes that might result with those actions. So as an example, what could happen if you take the action of leaving your cane behind? Another action could be on the list. It could be that you take your cane with you. Are there additional actions that could be listed? That could be possibilities. Maybe on your list, you identify that you could talk to your friends as you bring your cane about why you have it. And you could advocate and share information about how it's helpful to you. Once you've processed the situation, you've listed the possible outcomes. Now it's time to take action. In the action step, remember, you are taking the action to lead you to the best possible outcome for yourself and sometimes others. In this example, with using or not using our cane or other mobility aid or device, the actions you might be deciding between are bringing the cane or not bringing the cane, using the cane or not using the cane. Sometimes there might be multiple steps. So to help you decide if you should bring your cane, maybe you need to first talk to your orientation and mobility instructor. Maybe you need more time to be able to bring your cane along, which comes in the form of training. Maybe you need more training. So actions can be long-term, they can be short-term, they can be quick, and they can sometimes take a little while to be able to use. Then you are going to take notice. Here's where you have already taken action and you think about what the consequences were. What happened? Were you able to prevent the awkwardness? Did you get yourself out of an uncomfortable situation? I hope so. But if not, that's okay. It's an opportunity to reflect, learn, and plan on how you're going to handle the situation next time, and how you're going to handle the situation in the future if, like so many of those uncomfortable situations, it can't be prevented. So I would like you to type into the chat box, what does each letter of PLAN, plan, stand for? And the first person who types in the words that represent PLAN, plan, gets, drum roll, 1 million fake dollars. That's right, you heard it here first. You will get 1 million fake dollars if you write the words for PLAN, plan.
Oh, and Miss Kate, I've already got news for you. We are giving away this money to Toby, who writes P, process, L, list, A, action, N, notice. Toby, 1 million fake dollars are awarded to you. You can collect it at the end of today's lesson.
Excellent. Congratulations, Toby, and thank you and others for your responses. I really think I should have been a game show host, and Robin, you too. Future.
I do like it. It is a little fun.
All right, so we are going to move on to our next objective, which is learning about ways to handle situations that are uncomfortable, awkward, and embarrassing when they do, and they will, happen. Some situations are unpreventable. And as the saying goes, stuff happens. And when it does, we have to deal with it. It can be helpful to use your previous experiences and reflections on those experiences to identify the approaches that work well for you and the approaches that maybe haven't worked so well. We are going to discuss 3 common approaches to responding to uncomfortable, awkward, and embarrassing situations. We're going to talk about ignoring the situation, acknowledging to self, and acknowledging to self and others. I will now define each of those. So, an awkward, uncomfortable, or embarrassing moment happens, as they do, stuff happens, and you decide to ignore the situation. That means that we pretend it didn't happen. We just move on. For example, if you accidentally bump into someone, if you ignore the situation, you just keep on going without saying anything, without really thinking about what happened. You just ignore it and you keep going. That's ignoring. And it's something that some people do. It's an approach to handling awkward, uncomfortable, or embarrassing situations. And we'll talk more in a bit about the advantages and disadvantages to ignoring, and the other approaches. The next, as I said, is acknowledging to self. This is when we recognize, pay attention to what happened in our minds, but we keep the thought to ourselves. So if you bump into someone, we think, oh my gosh, I just ran into someone in our heads, but you don't say anything out loud. And you might just keep on moving. You might take time to really think about why it happened and when it happened, how it happened, and how you can prevent it in the future. But all of that thinking happens inside the head and you don't say anything. That's when we acknowledge to self. The third approach is acknowledging to self and others. And I bet you can guess what that means. When we acknowledge to self and others, this means that we identify the situation, we think about it in our heads, but then we also acknowledge it to others. So if we bump into someone, we acknowledge it in our own minds. Oh my gosh, I just ran into someone. And then we say something to someone else. Hopefully, if you've just run into someone, that something that you said would be, oops, sorry, I did not mean to run into you. So again, those three approaches that are very common in handling uncomfortable, awkward, and embarrassing situations are to ignore the situation, to acknowledge to self, and lastly, to acknowledge to self and others. So I'd like to talk about some advantages and disadvantages to each of these approaches. So let's start with the approach of ignoring. What do you think might be a good thing, an advantage about ignoring a situation? You can think about it, or you can even type it into the chat box. What's a good thing, an advantage to ignoring an uncomfortable, embarrassing, or awkward moment when it happens? And remember, ignoring is when you just move on from the moment without thinking about it, without saying anything or doing anything. What might be an advantage? Robin, I'm curious, did anyone have anything to say in the chat?
All right. I know our answers are still coming through, but right now we'll start with Zach, who says he hopes everyone else just ignores it too. Asher jumps in and says, it will just pass. I have to say, sometimes if it's really bad, if I don't acknowledge it, it didn't happen. I can just move on and pretend it didn't happen. My zipper was never down. I never walked into anybody. Ashley says, if it's going to cause a conflict. So reasons why we might. We have from Rich, if I didn't see it, it didn't happen. Oh, Rich, I'm right there with you. And it looks like that's all of our answers that have just popped up. And I will let you know if anybody else jumps in. Kate, back to you.
Thank you, Robin. Wow, how right you are. Sometimes it actually can feel pretty good just to ignore. We hope that maybe nobody saw, maybe nobody else noticed. And if I don't think about it, did it really happen at all? Or maybe I can just feel okay. But sometimes ignoring is not so good. So again, type into the chat if you have an idea of a disadvantage or why ignoring an uncomfortable, embarrassing, or awkward moment might not work in your best interest. What are the disadvantages to ignoring? We've highlighted a few things that work well or might make us feel good if we ignore, but let's recognize that sometimes ignoring is not the best strategy to use. Can you think of a disadvantage for ignoring?
All right, Kate, we already have two answers popping in. Rich says, people might think you're a jerk or the situation could come back to you later. Zach says, if what I did hurt someone. And Ricky Lynn says, you could come off as rude. Great answers. Oh, here comes Asher. People won't understand why something happened and they could make fun of you or that you did something on purpose.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Robin, and thank you all for responding. What I'm really hearing is that sometimes if we ignore an uncomfortable or awkward situation, it can actually make it feel worse, worse for yourself, maybe sometimes even worse for the other person. So I like to think about both sides. Sometimes ignoring works well, and sometimes it does not work well. All right, let's move on to the next approach we talked about, acknowledging to self. And I'm going to go ahead and just go through some of the advantages and disadvantages of acknowledging to self. So sometimes when we acknowledge to ourselves that something embarrassing has happened, in other words, we think about it, we really process the situation, it might help us build awareness about the event and how to prevent it from happening in the future. And sometimes processing in our minds, thinking about it, acknowledging that it happened to ourselves, it can also maybe help us maybe feel a little bit better. We can rationalize with ourselves, it really wasn't so bad. It's okay. Offer ourselves comforting words. I know I do that sometimes. When I feel really embarrassed about something that happened, I'll just think about things that have happened to other people that were embarrassing for them. Because remember, they happen to all of us. And so I acknowledge it in my mind. Yeah, this happened to me. I feel a little awkward. I'm definitely uncomfortable, but you know what? It's going to be okay. And I think about those things, and then I start to feel a little bit better. But other times, I acknowledge that it happened to myself. I'm thinking about, wow, that was super, super awkward. And then I find myself feeling worse, thinking about all of the horrible, horrible things that could have happened, that could result from this terribly embarrassing situation. Oh my gosh, I ran into someone. He's never going to talk to me again. I really like this person. And what are they going to think of me? And it just spirals from there. It gets worse and worse and worse. And I can't stop fixating on the situation. When it comes to being embarrassed, especially when you are in middle and high school, it's sometimes hard to let those moments go, even in our minds. So that's a bit of a disadvantage to acknowledging it to the self. It could lead us to not be able to stop thinking about it. Acknowledging it can be a good thing, as we said, and sometimes it can have some disadvantages too. Lastly, we're going to talk about acknowledging to self and others. So this is really where you are thinking about what happened in your head, and then you're doing something about it or saying something about it. And that could be with other people who are involved in the situation. So again, I'm going to go through some possible advantages just to keep us moving. So if you acknowledge it to yourself, again, maybe it helps you feel better. You're able to process, tell yourself, it really wasn't that bad. Plan for the future. I know what to do next time to prevent it from happening again. And you acknowledge it to another person, and now they suddenly understand why it happened or where you were coming from. By communicating with another person, you're giving them a little bit of your perspective. Oh, I'm so sorry I ran into you. I'm actually visually impaired. I didn't see you there. I definitely did not mean to do that. And suddenly this person who was so full of anger because they thought you purposely bumped into them now knows, oh, well, this person's just visually impaired and it really wasn't their fault. It can help create understanding and even resolve conflict. But sometimes we acknowledge to ourselves and we acknowledge to others, and things get a little worse. Again, it might not feel good in the moment to admit what happened in our head, and it might not feel good to admit what happened or what is happening to someone else. I don't love having to say out loud, oh, sorry, I bumped into you, because my face might get a little redder. It might feel a little hotter. That embarrassment might grow for a moment until the situation is resolved. Let's say, because I know this is something that's happened to me, let's say you trip over a backpack that someone has left on the floor next to their desk or their chair. I imagine maybe that's happened to some of you. If you acknowledge it to yourself and to others, you might think, oh my gosh, I just tripped. Everybody's looking at me. But wait, I'm going to say something funny. I'm going to use humor in this moment. And I'm going to say, whoops, didn't see that there, but I'm okay. And so by acknowledging it to yourself and to others, possibly you have helped everybody feel better. Make it just a little bit less awkward. Or maybe acknowledging it to yourself and others just makes it feel worse, and everybody's staring at you and you say something that you thought was going to be funny, but nobody's laughing, or maybe they are laughing, but you think they're laughing at you and you're just not sure, and it feels terrible. It happens. We get embarrassed. We feel awkward. We feel uncomfortable. It happens to everyone. The best thing we can do is to try and prevent these situations from happening, but inevitably at times in our lives, they will. And it doesn't feel good, but by thinking, processing through prior experiences and how we handled them and what worked well and what didn't, then, and by talking to other people about them, sometimes even laughing with other people about these situations might help us feel a heck of a lot better. Also, I have found sometimes communicating about a vision impairment is its own strategy that can help me feel a little bit better in a moment. And sometimes I've noticed that it can actually help someone else feel a little bit more comfortable. I already gave the example of, running into someone, and if I don't have my cane or a guide dog with me, and they don't know that I'm visually impaired, then they might be upset that I ran into them. But if I tell them, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that, I'm visually impaired and I didn't see you there, they might understand the situation. They might understand why it happened. They might be compassionate, understanding, and just let it go. I'm sure you can think of personal experiences when you talked to people about your vision impairment as a way of maybe breaking the ice. One time I was at a restaurant and someone in the middle of dinner came up to me, someone I didn't even know, a total stranger. And they were like, hey, what are you looking at? Are you staring at me? And I was so confused. I was like, no, I'm definitely not staring at you. And they were like, yeah, well, you've been looking at me for like 5 minutes from across the room. What's up? You trying to start a fight? And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to let this person know I'm visually impaired. They had no idea. My cane was folded up under my chair and they obviously hadn't seen it. So to prevent the awkward situation from getting even more awkward, embarrassing, and uncomfortable, I simply said, you know what? I'm actually blind, so I didn't mean to be staring at you. In fact, I didn't even realize I was staring at you. And at that point, I might even pick up my cane and say, yeah, this is the cane I use, so I know where people are when I'm walking around. And I'm really sorry about that. It might happen again because as you go sit back down, I have no idea where I'm looking. Sorry about this uncomfortable moment. It happens. And it can be challenging to talk about our vision impairment, especially for those people who haven't had many opportunities to say they're visually impaired. Maybe you haven't even decided on the words that feel right for you. I can tell you that it took me a long time to be able to become comfortable with the words, I am blind. I was very uncomfortable with that for many, many, many years. But it was only when I learned that it's one part of who I am, not every part of who I am. And I started to realize that by communicating about it, sometimes I'm actually helping to prevent discomfort for myself and for other people. And so it got a whole lot easier. A starting point when we're communicating about our vision impairment really is to decide on the words that feel right to you. And there are many ways to describe your differences. If it's a vision impairment that you're deciding how to talk about, you might use words like visually impaired or legally blind or partially sighted or someone who has low vision. You might describe your disability. You might describe yourself as disabled, or maybe some or all of those words don't feel quite comfortable to you. But the bottom line is, when you know the words that help you describe who you are, and when you're able to communicate those words to other people, it's going to help them feel more comfortable as well. When we're with ourselves,
We have lost you for a minute there.
And I don't know about you guys.
Oh, wait. Hey, Kate. Kate,
can you hear me now?
Yeah,
yes, can you hear me?
A quick freeze. So the last minute, we did not hear you.
Oh my goodness, that was the best minute of all.
Well, come back and tell us again.
Oh my goodness, what do you recall? What was the last thing you did here?
You know what? It might be different for everybody because it was a slow blah, 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 that came out.
Well, you know what, Robin? That's awkward. But how I'm going to handle this situation is just by recognizing that sometimes there are internet troubles, and I'm going to take the action of moving on. So the things I was talking about in the last 30 to 60 seconds or so was just about how communicating about our vision impairment can sometimes help a situation. It can help us feel more comfortable. It can maybe sometimes even help other people feel more comfortable. It can kind of break the ice. You may remember the situation in a restaurant where someone confronted me, the guy staring, but when they learned that vision impaired, the situation de-escalated and all was well in the moment, and in my mind, all felt right with the world. But really, it begins by knowing yourself, by knowing the words that feel right for you when talking about your vision impairment. It's a very personal thing. Each of us might identify differently. You might choose to use words like blind, legally blind, partially sighted, someone with low vision, or others. Maybe you describe yourself as having a disability, or maybe you do feel like you are someone who is disabled. Before others can comfortably talk about your vision impairment, you have to be able to comfortably talk about it too. And sometimes just being able to say the words, I am visually impaired, I am blind, or relatedly, I use assistive technology, I use this cane to help me get around, I use Braille to help me read. Sometimes just saying those words to ourselves and to other people helps prevent us from feeling awkward, uncomfortable, and sometimes even embarrassed. I wonder if some of you can relate. Communicating about vision impairment isn't always easy, especially in middle school and high school when you're just learning so much about yourself. And don't we all just want to feel like we fit in and like we belong? And if you're the only one in your school who's blind or visually impaired, it might not feel so good to have to say, I'm blind or visually impaired. It might not feel so good to talk about that difference. But I promise you that in certain situations, it actually might be pretty helpful. You might ask yourself, in this moment or in other times in my life, will communicating about my vision impairment be helpful in this situation? Why or why not? Who would I be talking to? And how does the person I'm speaking to impact what I would say? I might, for instance, say to a friend, oh yeah, I'm blind and I have been since this age, or I was born blind. I might give them, some more information about it. Or maybe when I'm talking to a teacher, I might describe how it affects me in my learning and the accommodations like Braille or large print or technology I use to help me engage in the classroom. Think about what's going to help the situation. What's going to make you get to the best possible outcome for yourself. And as we grow and age and gain more experiences in life, it might change. Today, you may feel like communicating about a vision impairment sounds terrible and would be way too awkward. But maybe later in life, you might find that actually talking about it did help. So very briefly, we're just going to go over the things we talked about today. Who experiences awkward, uncomfortable, and just not so fun situations? I hope you're thinking everyone, not just people who are blind and visually impaired, although we certainly do sometimes, but everyone, regardless of ability or disability, sometimes feels awkward, sometimes feels uncomfortable, and sometimes gets embarrassed. Today, we also talked about the acronym PLAN, PLAN. And this stands for process, list, action, and notice. We talked about 3 common responses for handling unwanted situations: ignoring, acknowledging to self, and acknowledging to others. And finally, we talked about communicating about our vision impairment and how sometimes that can actually help prevent an uncomfortable situation. And sometimes it can help us handle an uncomfortable situation while acknowledging that it's not always easy, it can be difficult, and it can take some time to really reflect on the words and the way we're going to say these things. I hope you have enjoyed our time together today. I know I certainly have. If you have any questions, this would be a great time to type them into the chat box. We have just a couple of minutes, so not too much time, but we might be able to get to a question or two. And I also want to leave you with my email address. If you would like to reach out to me as someone who is blind or visually impaired, someone who can relate to some of the stuff that we've been talking to today, please feel free to email me. I believe Robin will type my email into the chat box, and I'll go ahead and say it. My email is kate.katulak@perkins.org. So again, that's KATE.
And all of a sudden, and Kate has started to freeze. So Kate, hang on a second. I'm going to say it out loud. KATE.KATULAK @ Perkins, which is PERKINS.org. And I want to say thank you so much, Kate. This was fabulous. We really enjoyed it. I hope we get you back again soon.
I would love that. Thank you all.
If anyone is listening to know what is coming next, tomorrow we are talking about understanding my breath. So breathing. So that's what we're talking about tomorrow. And next week, Tuesday, it will be a Spanish, all in Spanish lesson about making a banana shake. On Wednesday, it'll be theater. So if you like theater, that's a great one to come to. And then on Thursday is Mindfulness Matters. So we are really looking forward to seeing you.